On this week's NFV SDN Reality Check, we speak with the Open Networking User Group on its advocacy for open interoperable hardware and software-defined infrastructure. Well, thanks for joining us on this week's NFV SDN Reality Check. I am your host, Dan Meyer, Editor-in-Chief at RCR Wireless News. Well, enterprises are seen as some of the earliest test cases in terms of the telecommunications industry's push into virtualization platforms, with many operators working with those enterprise customers on applications and services using SDN, NFV, and cloud. At the same time, many enterprises are themselves moving into the software-defined space as they look to drive further efficiencies across their operations. The one challenge to this move is in garnering sufficient economies of scale in terms of working with the vendor community and supplying the platforms needed by enterprises. One organization looking to bridge that gap is the Open Networking User Group, which was formed in 2012 with an initial focus on membership from a number of financial institutions, including Bank of America, Fidelity Investments, JP Morgan, Chase, and UBS. The organization focuses on an open cloud infrastructure and providing members with insight into deployment opportunities using software-defined platforms. The ONUG recently moved on its first collaborative effort to launch a set of initiatives it said are focused on open IT frameworks and markets' commitment to help support a transition to open software-defined infrastructure. The initiative includes the Open SD-WAN exchange, an open interoperable control plane, open traffic management format, and open network state format. ONUG said the initiatives were based on its working member group requirements. Current ONUG members include Cisco, Glue Networks, NetScout, Entity Innovation Institute, New Age Networks, Verizon Communications, and Versa Networks, among others. Supporting vendors are set to participate in a series of 4 workshops in New York later this year, with ONUG planning to host updated sessions at its fall event. On this week's NFV SDN Reality Check, we speak with Nick Lippis, who's the co-chairman and co-founder of the Open Networking User Group, on its efforts in serving as the enterprise voice in the continued push towards virtualized platforms. Let's take a look at the interview with Nick now. All right, thanks for joining us this week. My name is Dan Meyer, Editor-in-Chief at RCR Wireless News, and this week we're joined by Nick Lippis, who's the co-founder of ONUG, or the Open Networking User Group, if I get that correct. Hey, Nick, thanks for joining us this week. We appreciate it.
Excellent, Dan. Thanks so much for having me. A real pleasure.
Great, appreciate it. Well, maybe start off with, for those who don't know much about ONUG, what you guys do and how you participate in the software telecom space or the software space.
Yeah, well, ONUG is a user group, and so it was founded by myself and a gentleman named Ernest Leffner. And Ernest was working at Fidelity at the time, but now he's at Bank of America. And the genesis of this really came out when the whole discussion around open networking first came onto the marketplace. And we realized that there's really, the user voice wasn't really in this discussion. And so we decided, hey, well, let's start to see if if there's an interest in having a group of IT execs from the financials to get together and start talking about this kind of technology and how it could be deployed. So Ernest hosted the first one at Fidelity in Boston, and it was an experiment, and it was a huge experiment, or a huge success. And so what happened after that is then we started to, JP Morgan wanted to host us, then Citigroup wanted to host, then Columbia University, then New York University, and Morgan Stanley and Credit Suisse, and then in the next 2 weeks we're going to be out in California for the first time on Mountain View, and Intuit is hosting basically ONUG Spring in May. So that's how it started, and it's run by a board of IT execs. There's no vendor influence into ONUG in terms of its agenda. The working groups that we produce and that we run, it's very use case driven. So the community gets to vote on use cases that are important to them in terms of identifying propensity to buy and problem sets that they're working on collectively. So I think the key thing that now that ONUG has is that it has an aggregated voice of IT executives. And that really hasn't happened in our industry before. So now it's a place where IT execs come, there's collaboration with the vendor community, and increasingly also with various different open standards organizations and open source groups as well.
Very interesting. And that's one thing I found interesting about your guys' group is when you look at the member list, it isn't, at least from us coming from the telecom side of things and, kind of following SDN and NFV the developments, it doesn't have the normal list of vendors or operators or things that we normally associate with this space. It is very much, like you said, IT execs from these large financial groups and things like that. So it is an interesting angle you guys are kind of bringing, or a different group or angle you're bringing to the market. It seems like, as opposed to what we're traditionally used to seeing in this space.
Yeah, I think that's what I think has been so important with ONUG. We started at that intersection between high tech and high finance, but now the board members, we have GE as a board member, FedEx, Intuit, Gap, Pfizer, just to name a few others. So it's both the community has expanded pretty significantly, and also the number of working groups and the problems that we're working on has also increased pretty significantly. We have like 9 working groups going on right now, and we're about to launch in 2 weeks. There's going to be 3 new frameworks: one on open hybrid cloud, one on software-defined security services, and also one on a concept called network services broker. So what's great about all of these initiatives is that they are totally driven by IT execs, and so they're meant for both IT execs to learn from each other, but also to provide an aggregated requirement list to the vendor community, so that they can build products that will satisfy the requirements and needs of the large part of the enterprise marketplace, which hasn't happened before.
Yeah, that's an interesting part, because I guess, how do you guys interact not just with each other, but with the vendors? Obviously, I know you guys have a show coming up, and we'll talk about that a little bit later too. But I guess, what's the interaction like, both internally amongst your different members, but also externally when you go to say the vendor market out there and say, hey, this is what we're looking to do. What's that interaction like with you guys?
Yeah, well, our organizing principle is really the working groups. Okay. And so in the working groups, they're chaired by IT execs, but the vendor community is also invited to participate within them, because we don't want to be creating requirements that are orthogonal to real engineering practices and things that actually can be built today. So there is a kind of a grounding, with the vendor community involved within the working groups. And so the output of those requirements, the requirements are driven by IT execs, but the solution sets, we are leaving that up to the vendor community. So we're not defining actually how they do it. We're just really defining what we need from them. And so the outputs of these working groups, they go from the life cycle as white paper, to feature verification testing, which we've done, then a proof of concept, multi-vendor proof of concept, and now we're about to launch basically 4 major initiatives, and we're calling them the Open IT Framework Initiatives. And so they're focused around the SD-WAN space, the overlay space, in network virtualization, and then actually, and very importantly, we are trying to move data management, or basically network management, into a big data analytics problem. And so we have 2 big initiatives focused on that space now.
Interesting. I guess, and what's been the reception so far when you guys do go with when you do work with the vendor community out there? I'm guessing, again, for them, it's got to be a unique perspective to, again, get these large IT companies out there, or large IT departments coming to them and say, hey, this is what we're looking to do. I'm guessing it'd be a pretty positive thing, but I guess, what are you seeing out there in terms of vendor involvement and kind of the reception of what you guys are bringing?
Yeah, I think there's 2 ways we measure that. One is that whenever we launch, we usually launch ONUG for the year in terms of the meetings. The demonstration spots sell out within 10 days. So that's usually a pretty big response right there. And then also, we want to collaborate and work with the vendor community to develop products that are going to be consumed by the marketplace. And so we have a lot of attendance and participation in the working groups as well, which are really important. And then when we go to ONUG, whenever we do whether it's feature testing or whether we do proof of concepts, the vendor community rallies around that. And we are really pleased to be able to work with them and to really put buyer and seller together to deliver something really good for the industry.
Interesting. Now, obviously, you guys, as part of your name, basically, it is kind of a focus on the open source community, I believe, or at least some sort of open standards as well. And it does seem, when it comes to this move towards NFV and SDN virtualization, the open source community is a growing part of this. I know Linux Foundation is a big supporter of a lot of this as well. I guess what you guys maybe bring different to the market than what's already kind of out there, because it does seem like, I've been covering the space for a few years now, and it seemed like for a while there, every week there was a new open source initiative that seemed to be launched, and that's slowed down a little bit recently. But what do you guys maybe bring different to the market, or a different view to the market?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. What really ONUG is, as a user group, these are the buyers of them. They have the biggest budgets, the biggest influence to consume these services. So we don't produce standards. We don't produce technology. We produce requirements. And in essence, the ONUG community are the deciders around which technologies win and which don't. So we're not. So that really separates us from like an open source kind of community or from other kind of standards organizations. We actually get to choose which ones of those technologies are beneficial to the ONUG community. And then we love to contribute to like help guide their initiatives by requirements through what comes out of the working groups as well.
Yeah, I'm guessing, again, from all my talks I've had with those open source groups, I mean, they're always asking, have more participation. I'm guessing, again, having someone like yourselves, or representative of what you guys do there, has got to be a big influence on them. I'm sure they appreciate having that sort of guidance, because it does seem like a lot of them, are trying to find some sort of a solid foundation of what they're trying to do. So obviously getting some input's got to be a big part for them.
We welcome all of these groups to come and participate at ONUG in the working groups and at the conferences as well. I think we can make their projects better by having a direct input into the folks who actually buy it, build it, consume it, and have to actually manage it. So we want them to be very successful. So we want them to be to come to ONUG, participate, and get engaged, and hopefully we can build a kind of a better open software-defined infrastructure world.
Yeah, very good, very good. Well, I guess maybe taking a step back and looking at the overall environment, I guess how it's evolved, as you look at, kind of the software standards and how SDN has kind of evolved over the past several years. Obviously, in the data centers, it's pretty well established, but as it moves out towards kind of broader markets, I know, again, like I said, we focus on telecom space, a lot of development there as well. I guess what's been your general view of how that development has, I guess, the pace of development, any sort of challenges that you've seen perhaps in terms of kind of that movement towards this broader use and I guess growing ecosystem of vendors out there?
Yeah, I think at the core of what's happening in the industry is this kind of separation of hardware and software. Yep. So it's the hardware has become commoditized thanks to kind of merchant silicon, and that's also price points have really come down on whether that's switching and now actually it's happening into the routing marketplace, just in the networking space. But that's also clearly happened in the compute space and also in the storage space as well. And so we're seeing a lot of the features and functions being moved out of proprietary hardware into like software. That is the big innovation. That is the big thing that's changing right now in the marketplace. And so how ONUG kind of takes advantage of that or wants to encourage that to continue is that we'll actually help define what are some of the key software aspects within this new kind of software-defined world that's occurring. And there are three kind of big things I think that are going on. One is cloudification. So a lot of companies have been building their own private clouds, and those are more software-defined infrastructures where we're getting commoditized hardware, and then a lot of software is now being extracted from that. Mm-hmm. So it's cloudification of that infrastructure, but it's through kind of automated orchestration. That is really, really key. So, how do you automate the deployment of compute, storage, and networking? And especially as we move in towards a hybrid cloud world, because you have this infrastructure in your private data center. There's also a different infrastructure in the cloud. We need to kind of tie these two together in order to deliver agility and value back to the enterprise marketplace. So cloudification is really key, and there's a lot of work that's being done there. The second area is around open IT frameworks. Mm-hmm. And so as we moved from a hardware-based infrastructure towards a software-based infrastructure, the thing that we don't want to do is we don't want to trade off a closed hardware world for a closed software world. Yeah. Right? So we want to actually move towards an open software-defined world. And so the area that we'll focus a lot on are open IT frameworks, and what are the important areas that need to be open. And then I think the third is around IT consumption models. Mm-hmm. So how IT is being consumed is fundamentally changing because of all these things that have been happening in the marketplace. The cloudification, as we mentioned before, the separation of hardware and software, different kind of price points of where do you kind of move applications, whether in the private or public cloud facilities. And that has a ripple effect. The whole IT consumption model change across the industry and within IT organizations as well. Like IT organization models are changing. The skill sets that are required to manage this infrastructure is totally changing as well. So anyway, I think those are the three, I think, key things that are kind of changing in this marketplace and that we've been focusing on. So it's around cloudification and open IT frameworks and also IT consumption models that are changing. And now from an SDN point of view, we kind of view SDN as one part of this larger software-defined infrastructure world that's happening. Mm-hmm. It's a really important part because the networking space is the last to really be automated. You know, it's still very copy, paste, CLI, and that's got to stop. You know, like that really has to change, and that's what's really kind of driving a lot of our activity. So, in a software-defined world, it's really around automating orchestration, and the networking piece is the one that's kind of kicking and screaming, kind of coming into that world. And so we spend a lot of time on that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, I guess, at this point in time here, I mean, how are those, those three things that you mentioned earlier that you're really focused on, how have those evolved, and are those to a level at this point that is sufficient enough in its robustness to handle what your members are looking for? Because it does seem like, again, like the cloud model, for instance. I mean, obviously hybrid cloud is becoming a big part of what's happening, but there are still concerns, and especially, I'm guessing from the financial community, when they start having some information, maybe in a public cloud or a private cloud, being able to have security and things that they need, is the market at a place now where it can support what your members are looking for in terms of some of those requirements, or is there still some work that needs to be done there?
There's a lot of work that needs to be done here. It's a journey, and so we're on the early stage of the journey. The place where, though, if you kind of look at where is the big bright spot in this marketplace, and that space is in the SD-WAN market. Yeah. That has the biggest pain points. A lot of companies still have like 1990s kind of architecture to support mobile and cloud kind of applications, and we have to contort applications to fit into that model. So that has been really rapid in terms of change, and I think ONUG kind of helped define that marketplace back at JP Morgan back in 2013. Actually, it was a guy named Jimmy Karianis from NYU that helped kind of like define this space that ONUG community then voted on, and we created a working group around it and so forth. But anyway, that's an area where there is a huge amount of deployment, scale of deployment, as well, and also where the service providers really need to come on in, as there's a great opportunity to have kind of an SD-WAN exchange where M&A activity occurs, where business or business partners need to be connections into service providers and cloud providers. So having the service providers offering kind of an SD-WAN public service is something that's desperately needed. I know Verizon is doing a lot of good work there. There's a few others, but I think the way that we've been seeing it so far is like Verizon is kind of leading in that space. We'd like to see a lot more companies so that there's more choice and more options as well. But
yeah, that makes sense. That's interesting you bring that up, because I have talked to a few companies over the past couple of weeks who are kind of focused on that SD-WAN space, and that does seem like, I hadn't heard much about it, 6 months ago, for instance, but it seems like over the past 6 months, that has been a market that's really, like you said, it's emerged pretty rapidly, and it does seem like from, again, like you're saying, what the people I've talked to have said, it's a needed environment out there. I mean, there's definitely a market for this out there, and it seems like the enterprises really are looking to have someone come in and really take charge in this market. And, again, Verizon obviously is a big part of that, but again, some other people need to kind of really help push this space and really support it. So that does seem interesting. You brought that one up, because that's one I have heard recently as being a lot of attention there. So interesting.
Yeah, the deployment curve is really ramping up. Like, there are companies with thousands of sites that are connected on SD-WAN, now. I think once you get to that kind of scale, then a lot of the larger, like especially in the banking industry, they feel more comfortable. So it's like within the next 18 months, there are going to be, SD-WANs that are thousands and thousands of sites big. So it's because it's addressing, there's a cost, there's an economic advantage to doing it. But more importantly, it's really around you can be much more agile. You can create much more business value with this kind of wide area networking structure versus the MPLS frame relay kind of WANs that we built, in the 1990s and early 2000s.
Yeah. Well, again, as coming from the telecom space, I mean, we're very familiar with how conservative, perhaps is the right word, for how conservative network operators are in terms of upgrading. And again, this move towards virtualization is definitely forcing a lot of them to look again at how their networks are constructed and orchestrated, and going forward what they're going to do with them. But again, I know from the telecom side at least, it is going to be a long process, unfortunately, for a lot of those guys out there. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think no, you're absolutely right, Dan, and I think therein lies the difference between ONUG and some of the other kind of initiatives for the service providers. And we realized really early on that that there are particular places where the service providers need to congregate and hash out their direction for their infrastructure, and then there's another space for the enterprise marketplace, because the enterprise marketplace moves a lot quicker. They're not encumbered by the massive scale that the service providers have. So in a lot of ways is that the enterprise marketplace will more or less lead the whole virtualization, the network service virtualization space, more than the service providers will, because the enterprise market is deploying it first and faster.
Yeah, makes sense. Before we move on a little bit more, I guess as you look forward a little bit over the next 12 to 18 months, or even 2 years, I mean, what do you see as maybe some bigger challenges that you guys perhaps might see in the market there that you expect to have to tackle, or maybe even from outside of your own organization, what you guys see in terms of kind of the hurdles maybe that might trip up the continued development and deployment of some of these technologies that your member groups are looking to deploy? Yeah,
I think well, kind of a loaded question. There's a bunch in there. The way that I'm kind of viewing it right now is that as we move into the software-defined world, there are places where you need to start laying down requirements around what needs to be open and what can stay closed. Okay. And so actually, and we're doing that at ONUG. We have a program, it's called the Open IT Frameworks. And in there, we are calling for an open SD-WAN exchange, where you can have controllers from different SD-WAN providers to exchange information. They can still stay proprietary and unique within their own kind of ecosystems, but there needs to be an exchange between the two. So that's one area. Another area is around overlays. So overlays are becoming really popular, but there's no way to interconnect different overlays from different companies. So there needs to be an open, interoperable control point or control plane for the overlays. So you can, interconnect these overlays over some period of time, and have multiple vendors, within them as well. There's no standards for that as well. Like, I'm not sure, where is the IETF? Where is the IEEE, in this world? It seems like, they're kind of busy off doing some other things, and we'd love to see them focus, on these kinds of problems. Another area is that if we think about some really nice activity that's happening in the industry, is a lot of the vendors are having basically open APIs or REST-based APIs into both their physical equipment and virtual equipment. But the problem is that there's no common format for any of that. Yeah. So that you might be able to pull data out, or you might be able to do streaming telemetry out from those devices or that software. But then what you're getting is really all unique to that one particular vendor. So you'd have these N different databases for N different APIs. And then an IT organization would have to kind of spend a huge amount of time in development to try to orchestrate that and basically provide a normalization for all of that format. So we're calling for a format that's common. It's great to have the APIs, but we need a common format so that we can pull all that data and really state data from the infrastructure. And once you have that, then we can now start moving network management and infrastructure management into a big data problem versus the SNMP world that we live in today and the CLI world that we live in today. So it would be so great if we can now get into analytics, meaning that, okay, I want to place this new load onto this network. What might be the performance? So you get a predictive kind of performance. You can also then really look at behavior anomaly or anomalistic behavior detection. So there's a really great security a value proposition in this kind of model as well. Also, if you need to kind of move a service around within your infrastructure, then having kind of an analytics engine that can actually pull state information, and then you could do predictive analytics against those requirements as well. So that is, I think, that and also automation. Yeah. kind of an open way to do automation are really fundamental towards the life cycle of software managed infrastructure. So I think, I don't want to go on and on, but I think those are, I think, some of the key things that are really important to the ONUG community. And they're really important, not just as a wish list, is that if we don't have these things, it's going to slow down this market from progressing. So they are really on the critical path towards seeing and realizing the full potential as a marketplace progress.
I obviously, the interoperability and standards, I mean, those are two things that we hear a lot on the show. And again, that's always been a big challenge because, again, like you said, I mean, you don't want to move from a hardware to software environment if there's that same kind of vendor lock-in. I mean, there's no point in being, making the move if you can't have a new open community. And that's the challenge for the vendors because their legacy business models are always built on kind of locking somebody into their products and being able to open those things up to interoperability and working together. That's a new model for a lot of those guys who are trying to change and evolve, and that's a little uncomfortable for some. But you're right; it's got to be part of the process moving forward. So that's going to be a big part of this going forward. Obviously, are those 2 points there. So,
Dan, you hit on a really important point, and that is that as we move into the software-defined world, the business models are really not well understood. And so companies. Some of them will feel threatened that they're kind of moving into a lock-in mitigation kind of world. Others don't know how to kind of charge for kind of a software-defined infrastructure marketplace. A lot of the IT execs don't know how to pay for it. Like the procurement groups are somewhat confused as, okay, well, what is this thing, and and how do we actually pay for it? What's the licensing arrangement and so forth? So, but what we also realize at ONUG is that it is so fundamental that we have sustainable business models for these existing companies and new companies as we move into a software-defined world, because we want a world where companies prosper. They can invest in research and development. They can invest in global support for their products as well. So anyway, that's a real big topic. Actually, that's a topic that we're going to be focusing on at this next coming up ONUG. So, but we have a vested interest in making sure that there are good, sustainable business models for this ecosystem that's developing. Yeah,
great. And obviously a good segue for, I guess, one final quick topic before I let you go is, obviously you guys do have an event coming up. I guess as you're looking forward to that event, I mean, what's going to be the main focus of the event? What do you expect to get out of it? What's the excitement coming from that event coming up?
Yeah, I think we're really excited because there are 2 particular keynotes in particular that I think are really important. There's Tony Scott, who is the US CIO, who is presenting, and there's also a Major General, Sarah Zabel. Now first time we've ever had a general come into ONUG, and we're just really honored and pleased and just excited to have both of them. But what this does, though, is that it basically aligns both the federal government and the enterprise marketplace together to have that aggregated voice around requirements and needs as we move into a software-defined world. And so if you look at it, like the ONUG community, back of the envelope budget is about $120 billion large. That's going to more than double now by having both Tony Scott represented and Major General Sarah Zabel. So anyway, so I think that's really important coming out of this ONUG. So it's, we started at the intersection between finance and high tech, and it's really expanded pretty significantly. I think the other things that are important here for this ONUG too is the frameworks that are being presented for the first time, and also the open IT frameworks as well. So these kind of open initiatives with the vendor community. So hopefully we'll start those, and those will progress for subsequent ONUGs. And we'd love to see companies making product announcements around these initiatives over the period of time, having interoperability demonstrations on the demonstration floor around these as well. So I think that's probably the 2 most important things. So it's the federal government participation now, and then also it's the open IT frameworks, and also these other frameworks around hybrid cloud, software-defined security services, and network services broker. So.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, obviously, again, if your membership alone with their vast resources was not a big enough draw for the community, the vendor community out there, obviously adding the federal government as well would just seem to make it outsized to look at that. I mean, again, it's a huge market out there for vendors to really participate in. So it sounds like it should be a pretty good event.
Yeah, I think so. It's exciting, and it's exciting that we're being hosted by Intuit, as well. So I love that we're never at hotels because we've all spent way too much time in it.
I hear that. Yes, yeah, I'm good to hear that as well. So, well, great, Nick. We definitely appreciate the insight today. Obviously, a lot going on in your space there, and you guys have been very busy, and a lot of news coming from you guys. And again, good to see membership too. Again, it's a unique focus that you guys bring to the market, which I think for the whole ecosystem is a great to have. So it's good to see you guys really prospering out there. But again, we definitely appreciate the insight today. And obviously, good luck with the show coming up too. And again, hopefully we'll touch base again soon and maybe catch up and see what you guys have been up to.
Awesome, Dan. Thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity also to be with you.
That sounds great. Thanks again.
Okay.
Well, that'll do it for this week's show. Make sure to check us out again next week when we are scheduled to speak with Versa Networks on the importance of testing interoperability for NFV and SDN. Thanks for watching.
NFV SDN Reality Check with Dan Meyer is a production of RCR TV. To suggest show topics or to reach Dan, you can find him on email, dmeyer@rcrwireless.com, and on Twitter @Meyer_Dan. For more Dan, news on NFV SDN, and everything wireless, find your way over to rcrwireless.com.